Okay, let's dive right into this explainer by tackling a pretty massive biological paradox. How exactly can a constant state be constantly changing? It's a bit of a brain teaser, right? Well, to wrap our heads around it, I want you to picture a duck paddling underwater. If you look at that duck from above the surface, it appears completely smooth, still, and totally effortless. But beneath the water, its webbed feet are kicking chaotically, continuously, just to maintain that perfectly calm position up top. And you know what? That is exactly what your body is doing every single second of the day. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to explore the massive, mind-boggling amount of complex, multi-level biological activity that is required to keep you alive, functioning, and completely stable. We're looking at homeostasis, and we're going to completely demystify the illusion of stillness that our bodies project. We're taking a biological elevator ride today. First, we'll cover the illusion of stillness. Second, systemic balance and feedback. Third, cellular homeostasis. Fourth, we'll dive into regulating the genetic network. And fifth, we'll look at how this is a lifelong dynamic process. So let's start on the top floor and actually define what we're talking about. Section 1, the illusion of stillness. The term homeostasis comes from Greek roots meaning similar and standing or condition. So if you translate it literally, it means staying the same. The concept itself was first described by Claude Bernard, but the actual term was coined by Walter Cannon way back in the late 1920s. But here is the trick, and it's a big one. Walter Cannon's early definitions tell us that homeostasis is actually a highly active state of constant regulation. It is the dynamic stability of your internal physiological conditions. Now, what's really fascinating here is how this totally uproots a very common myth. Educational studies show that a lot of people view homeostasis as a static state of rest, or maybe some sort of rigid equilibrium that stubbornly hinders change. But the scientific reality? It's entirely different. Your body is literally never at rest. It is locked in a ceaseless, dynamic, bidirectional process of continuous deviation correction. Basically, it's an active entity that's constantly fixing tiny errors just to keep you in a safe zone. Let's look at how the body pulls off this active stability on a macro scale. Section 2, systemic balance and feedback. This brilliantly illustrates the loop of negative feedback, which is absolutely the core mechanism of homeostasis. Here's how it works. Conditions change, drifting away from a set point. A receptor senses this deviation, or stimulus, and fires that information over to a control center, like your brain or your spinal cord. That control center then activates corrective mechanisms using an effector, like your muscles or glands. These actions reverse the change, conditions return to the set point, and the corrective mechanisms are finally switched off. It's just a continuous, beautiful, never-ending loop. Let's ground this with a really relatable example. Body temperature. When thermoreceptors in your skin or inside your core detect temperature changes, the hypothalamus in your brain acts as the ultimate control center. So if you're too cold, it sends frantic signals to skeletal muscles to start shivering, generating heat through tiny, rapid muscle spasms. If you're too hot, it triggers your sweat glands and causes your blood vessels to dilate. Everything works together in harmony to force the body back to its baseline temperature. Now, the crucial point here is that it's not just the rapid responses of your nervous system doing the heavy lifting. The endocrine system uses long-distance hormonal signals to constantly manage your core vital parameters too. We are talking about keeping your blood glucose perfectly balanced using insulin and glucagon. It manages plasma osmolarity and fluid balance with hormones like vasopressin. It regulates arterial blood pressure, keeps calcium and phosphate levels strictly controlled for your bones and kidneys. It even maintains your daily circadian rhythms. It's just a massive, multi-organ communication network constantly chattering away. Okay, let's zoom in past the organs, drop the elevator straight down into the tissue fluid, and explore the cellular level. Section 3, cellular homeostasis. To keep us from getting overwhelmed by the sheer density of cellular biology, we can neatly categorize cellular homeostasis into 3 main branches that literally keep the cell from dying. First up, energy balance. Cells have to continuously generate ATP fuel through pathways like glycolysis, dynamically adjusting if the supply suddenly drops. Second, ion and pH regulation. You've got these tiny membrane pumps and channels meticulously maintaining the proper osmotic balance and acidity just so your enzymes can actually function. And third, protein quality control. Specialized molecular chaperones help fold proteins correctly, while lysosomal pathways act as a microscopic waste disposal system to degrade the damaged ones. So, why does all this matter? Well, because if any of these microscopic regulatory mechanisms fail, the consequences are incredibly dire. If the pH deviates even a little, your enzymes denature. If protein quality control drops, non-functional or toxic proteins start to accumulate. This throws off that delicate cellular balance, leading to immediate cell death, or on a larger scale, severe disorders like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or cancer. Let's see how this all builds as we take the elevator down to the absolute basement, the molecular and mathematical level. Section 4, regulating the genetic network. To understand this at the most fundamental level possible, we can look at complex mathematical biology by comparing gene regulatory networks, or GRNs, to protein mRNA networks. Notice these abstract geometric input-output networks. Biologists use these bipartite-directed graphs to visually anchor how gene products actually respond to environmental changes. By tracking both mRNA and protein concentrations simultaneously as nodes in a network, they create a literal mathematical map of biological stability. And from these mathematical maps comes a truly fascinating concept called infinitesimal homeostasis. Even without getting bogged down in dense calculus, we can see that our genes exhibit this exact property. It happens when a target input-output function stays within a highly narrow range because it reaches a critical, stationary point where its mathematical derivative drops exactly to zero. Because the value of a function changes most slowly right near this critical point, the gene's expression stays perfectly, astonishingly stable despite wide external variations in the environment. When you analyze the matrices of these networks, they actually break down into specific recognizable patterns. You've got structural classes like Haldane homeostasis, or appendage classes like null degradation. Essentially, what these complex mathematical proofs show us is that even our barest, most fundamental genetic code relies on continuous feed-forward and feedback loops to maintain function. The actual blueprint of homeostasis is quite literally written right into the mathematics of our DNA. Finally, let's ride the elevator all the way back up to the macro level and stretch our timeline out over an entire lifetime. Section 5, a lifelong dynamic process. Homeostasis isn't just a minute-by-minute or daily cycle, It is a lifelong process. Over decades, this shifting process is called allostasis. As you grow from childhood into adulthood and eventually into old age, your body doesn't just stubbornly hold on to one single set point forever. Instead, it establishes entirely new baseline levels to adapt to the changing realities of aging, your environment, and chronic stress. Your heart rate, your metabolism, and your endocrine baselines shift dynamically to keep you alive and functioning at every single stage of your life. I absolutely love this quote from researcher Peter Sterling back in 2004, "Stability through constancy through change." It just brilliantly captures the whole essence of our explainer today. True biological stability isn't about being perfectly still or frozen in time. Homeostasis is a constant state achieved purely by a tireless, never-ending process of changing, adjusting, sensing, and correcting. As we wrap up this explainer, I just want you to take a brief moment to marvel at that illusion of stillness. You might just be sitting there right now feeling completely at rest, but think about the millions of microscopic corrections happening inside you at this exact second. From your hypothalamus aggressively regulating your temperature, to your cells frantically balancing their pH, to your genes mathematically holding their expression steady. It is all that chaotic, beautiful paddling under the surface just to keep you sitting comfortably. So what is your body adjusting for you right now? Keep wondering and keep learning.